The following stories are from members of Hanmaum Church in South Korea. They aired on a Korean Christian TV network called C Channel and were dubbed in English.
Hello, I am Serim Cho from Hanmaum Church in Chuncheon. I was someone who was cynical and skeptical about the world because I was stuck in my own thoughts. Then I met the risen Lord, and through him I was able to know the real purpose of my life and how to truly love others. I would like to share my testimony with you. During my school days, I didn't have anyone whom I considered to be a best friend. I don't remember anyone's names from school, not even a single teacher or anyone from my classes. All of my memories from then are just a few snippets and fragments. I hardly remember anything from my school life. It's like I'd never gone to school at all. There were many times when someone from school would recognize me while I was out on the streets, but I struggled to remember their names. One time, there was a friend I met on the bus. I asked her, "Who are you?" And she told me that she shared a desk with me. After going through this embarrassing moment, whenever someone recognized me, I learned to carry on a conversation without using their names. You would think that I was this way because I was bullied in the past and I was putting up a barrier around me, or that I had some kind of abnormal disability that prevents me from recognizing faces. However, it wasn't that at all. It was just that I didn't have any interest in the people around me. I think this happened because I read more books compared to many other people. Due to my father's love for books, all four sides of our living room were packed with shelves of books, so I was able to read as many books as I wanted. Ever since I was able to read and start thinking on my own, I had read my dad's books. I think I tried to pull any book off the shelf just to read, even if I didn't understand the contents. My dad's library was like a small universe to me. I was able to go to places that I had never been to, meet people whom I had never met, and encounter new thoughts. When I read books, I felt like I was in that place or that country and having actual conversations with the people there. It was interesting how knowledge was being poured into me. It excited me to know that a person who didn't live in the same time period as me could share his or her thoughts with me through books. During middle school, I began to read all the novels in the bookstore without being picky because there weren't many novels in my dad's library. I read a lot of comic books too. No one told me to do this, but I would make a list of books like it was required reading and check off books as I read them. It was so easy for me to read 2 or 3 books a day. And by the second year of middle school, I had read all the books in that bookstore. Many people told me that I was very mature for my age. Having conversations with people much older was very easy for me as a teenager. I would chat with people online anonymously. Then when I told them how old I was, they would be really surprised. I think it was because there were things I hadn't yet experienced at my age, but it seemed like I had because I had gained those experiences from books. At some point, people started telling me that I was hard to figure out. They said, "You don't ever talk about yourself." Someone even told me I could spend 10 years with you and feel like I've only known you for a day. I never avoided talking about myself on purpose. Ever since I was little, I had realized that I had questions that other people had too, but there were no real answers to our questions. So what was the point of talking about anything if there were no definite solutions? Since I thought this way, I found myself not talking to people anymore. Whenever I met someone, I was able to quickly understand what they wanted to say and what they were thinking after talking to them for just a bit. I realized that everyone thought and talked about similar things. I was pretty quick to recognize things in people, but maybe because of the many books I read, I was able to get people to share their innermost feelings. It didn't take too long to get to know someone. However, there was no one that I was able to share my own heart with. There was no one I felt connected to or wanted to keep a lasting relationship with, not even my parents. That was because I thought there would never be anyone around me who would be beneficial to me. Instead of meeting actual people, I found people I wanted to meet in books and had conversations with them. While reading a book, if I didn't agree with or like what the book was saying, all I needed to do was close the book and that was it. But you can't do that with actual people. Fortunately, I had at least a very basic desire to be with people, so I wasn't a complete recluse. But I thought that it was completely possible for me to live without ever meeting a single person. Although I never thought Christians were strange, I found it fascinating when they were passionate and eager for their faith. I wasn't able to understand the belief that was deep within them. I was curious about things like that. Why did people in Africa and North Korea continue to die of starvation if God loved everyone? But I knew that all these were meaningless questions once I began to delve into all the unbelievable things in the Bible, so it was best to just not go there at all. I found it fascinating that people would still try to resolve their many issues through faith with all these unanswered questions about their own religion. I had tried going to church before, and when you try listening to what the message is really saying, it's telling you that God wants your whole life. If God wanted us to surrender our entire lives and not just a portion, I felt that there must be something to Him that was worth all that. But I couldn't see what that was, so I didn't pursue Christianity. Meanwhile, I would be living and working as hard as I could, but when I stopped and looked back, I could see people who were taking it slower, and we were all powerless over the same problems. In the face of poverty or death, these issues that all people face, we all found ourselves without any solutions. And as I saw everyone else pushing those issues aside, I also came to ignore them too. I felt like an 80-year-old. I couldn't take living like this anymore, having to bear the same conversations over and over again. So I made the decision to leave Korea. I felt like everything would work out if I just left the country. So I ended up going to Canada. I felt like things would be different if I went to a different country, a different environment, but nothing changed. Nothing changed about me, and after realizing that the people in this new place weren't really any different, I didn't want to see anyone anymore. All I ever did was go back and forth between home and school. Then I met a person who had immigrated to Canada who used to attend Hanmaum church in Chuncheon. I suddenly had to move out of my apartment, so I had found a room to rent in her home. There was one condition though. I would have to have Bible study with her. Normally I would have declined, but because of my urgent situation, I was fine with it. When we had our first Bible study, she asked me about my relationship with God. I tried to evade the question by telling her about a time I had a reasonably good experience with Him. But after listening to what I said, she asked me how I could believe that Jesus was God. At that moment, I thought to myself, whoa, how did she know that I didn't really believe in God? Also, the question itself was a very unfamiliar one, and I was surprised that such a normal and practical question could also apply to matters of God. Since I didn't say anything, she told me that there was a proof with which we could believe that Jesus was God. Then she said, "We are able to trust people to the extent they reveal themselves to us, so how can we trust a God who is invisible?" Her words struck me hard. Honestly, I should be the one asking these questions. I began to wonder if there really was proof. Then she asked me something else. She asked me if I knew that Jesus had been a real person. I did, but it hadn't seemed too important to me. People even worshipped rocks, so I thought believing in Jesus was the same thing. I thought you were just supposed to believe in some man named Jesus as God. However, she told me that it was very important to know that Jesus was a real person. He wasn't a made-up character. He had actually existed. And she asked me, what would you do if you were able to know that Jesus really was God through a sure proof, not through your personal convictions? So I asked her, what is that proof? Well, she said that the proof was Jesus' resurrection. When I heard that, inside my mind, I rolled my eyes. I felt like we had backtracked all the way to the beginning. Also, I felt like she was just telling me to believe in God through some story mentioned in the Bible. But she must have read my mind because she said that the resurrection was an event recorded in history and that many witnesses who had seen Jesus risen had been written about in history too. This was the first time I had met someone who confirmed the existence of God through common sense. And I thought, if God really, truly exists, if Jesus who lived 2,000 years ago is truly God through this solid proof, then I might be able to find the answers to all my questions that no person or book could provide the answers to. I had been wondering how much longer I had to live out an act, to keep talking about things that had no answers and pretending I was fine with that. I couldn't stop thinking about how there was supposed to be historical proof that Jesus was God. Other than while I was at school, I think I spent all week thinking about this and trying to find out more about it. As I kept discovering more written resources, the resurrection of Jesus Christ seemed to be revealing itself all the more. But despite the fact that there were more written records about the resurrection than any other historical event, I still wasn't satisfied. I kept thinking that it might not actually have happened. When I thought about how I had no trouble trusting books about places I had never been to, written by people I had never met, my current attitude felt pretty ridiculous. There were no witnesses against Jesus' resurrection, nor was there definite evidence that he hadn't risen again. But there were so many witnesses who had said that Jesus had risen. The day before I had Bible study, I put away all of my doubts. I felt foolish for continuously denying that he rose again because of a mere thought, despite all the witnesses before me. During Bible study, the sister I lived with asked me if I believed that Jesus' resurrection was real. I told her that I did. Then she asked me if I believed that Jesus was God because of this. Since I was aware of the fact that no one could resolve the issue of death, I knew what she meant when she asked me this. So I told her that I did. I said, yes, Jesus is God. So when she asked me if I believed that the Bible was the Word of God, I told her that I did. I was surprised by my own response. I could actually say that I believed in the Bible. This made me want to read the Bible as soon as I could. The sister told me to start reading the book of John first. When I did, there was nothing in John that made me stumble. It wasn't because I understood every verse that I read, but because Jesus had risen from the dead and he was God. I didn't want to question his words. As I read about the Samaritan woman in chapter 4, the Bible made me cry for the first time. I was able to realize why I had lived all this time the way I had. The woman hadn't wanted to meet anyone, so she had gone to the well during the hottest time of the day. Jesus had asked this woman for a drink of water. She had struggled to find something to quench her thirst. Nothing in the world could help her quench it. And Jesus had told her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water." As I read these words, I realized immediately that I had been just like the Samaritan woman, trying to find things to quench my thirst in the wrong places. I was reminded of Jesus' resurrection. Jesus had come to this world as a man, and through a solid proof, he had shown us that he is God. But because I didn't know who he was, I hadn't sought him to quench my thirst. I realized that this was why I couldn't find the water that could fill me up, and had lived this way all this time. That was when I realized that I couldn't stubbornly go my own way anymore. I had been walking down a path to a well in the desert, and it could never provide me with the answers I wanted. I had met the risen Jesus, and he was the only one who had the answers, so I had to stop and turn from where I was going. I could truly see that I had lived the way I had because I hadn't believed in Jesus. When Jesus said to the Samaritan woman, "I will give you water, so you will never thirst," I felt like he was speaking to me. Just like the woman, I told him, as if I were praying inside, "Jesus, give me this water. I have wandered all this time, but here I am now. I wandered all this time because I didn't know who you were, but now that I know you, please, please give me this water too." Only you, Jesus. You are the one who could give me everything I need because you are my Lord and my God. I'm so sorry that I didn't come to you until now. As I prayed this, I cried so much. This is how I was able to believe and confess that the risen Jesus was the Lord of my life. After that, many amazing things happened in my life. Once, I didn't find any meaning in seeing other people, but now there was a purpose. It was the first time that I realized why all people had the same questions in their hearts. It was because they had not met the risen Jesus, and he is the one who can answer all the questions we have. So guess what I did? Just like how the Lord Jesus had come to find me as my oasis in the desert, I really wanted to tell them about Jesus. I wanted to tell them that the answers they were looking for were with him. After believing in Jesus, my father's company declined and it became financially difficult for us. However, this kind of situation didn't shake me. What was amazing was that no matter what situation came my way, what was absolutely certain was that Jesus was my God because he had risen from the dead. So I was able to trust him and pray. Then I wasn't shaken. Before I had met Jesus, I had only contacted my parents just once during my entire stay in Canada, when I had first landed. That's how much I was trapped in myself. I had only thought about myself. and I was really selfish. However, when Jesus became my Lord, all of that changed. I used to feel burdened by the idea of making a single phone call, but I started to call my father in Korea every evening at 10 o'clock. It wasn't because I made myself do this, but I saw just how much my father was having a hard time due to life's worries, that I wanted to share about Jesus with him. After I started to call him with that heart, I continued to call him for the 4 years I was in Canada. I think it was a complete shock to my family when I did this. It became a big issue in my family, and they were amazed at how I called every day. They would say things like, "She's become a different person ever since she became a Jesus freak," or "She's finally turning into a human being." After believing in Jesus, I asked my cousin what kind of person I used to be. He said to me, "If I think about you dating a boyfriend, I would say it would be like a god dating its creation." I was completely shocked by his answer. Then God helped me think about something. It was my arrogant heart. When someone told me about their sadness or worries, I couldn't accept their feelings completely. It wasn't that I looked down on them, but I couldn't understand why people talked as if other people never went through the same problems, as if no one could understand what they were going through. If they were just a little more observant, they would be able to realize that there were so many other people who were going through the same things that they were. But I realized that because I thought this way, I couldn't understand anyone deeply. But God changed my heart so that I could go into another person's heart through the gospel and understand their pain. I could laugh and cry with them and bow down in prayer together. This was something that could never have happened with me. Right now, I live in the dormitories run by the church and receive discipleship training with college students. There was a time when I lived with a roommate who had been hurt by other people and was going through a hard time. As I shared her problems with God and bowed in prayer, I was able to see the heart God had for her. I cried a lot as I thought about how much she'd been hurt by the words of people who had no idea what she'd gone through. During early morning service, I began to pray desperately and sincerely for God to comfort her. I no longer question God's love when I see refugees in Africa like I used to. I shouldn't have evaluated God's love through their sufferings. Rather, I was to see exactly how God loved the world through the words of John 3:16, which were confirmed by the resurrection of Christ. Even if masses of people were to die before my very eyes, the fact that God loved mankind more than his own life and that he loves us still is a definite truth proven by his resurrection. Amen. I used to feel like our endless, repetitive lives were meaningless as I gradually lost all hope. Then the risen Jesus, who is the eternal living water, met me and breathed life into me. I used to not care about anyone but myself, but now I wanted to have conversations with people. I became desperate in wanting to share the solution I found in the risen Christ with everyone else. I have the key that can solve all the problems in this world. The master key that can unlock everything is the risen Jesus. I surrender to him again today, entrusting my whole life to him. Thank you.
If you'd like to see more stories about how the gospel changed lives, visit us at facebook.com/HMUOnlyJesus or Google us at HMU Only Jesus.